This post right here from director David Ayer pretty much says it all. I'm done with DC. And this is kind of surprising for a lot of people who follow David Ayer or are fans of David Ayer's, because he's been saying for a while that he's going to get his time to shine when it comes to the Ayer cut of the Suicide Squad, because famously the studio had a lot of interference in the final version of the movie, and a lot of people didn't like what happened with Suicide Squad when that came out in 2016. But David Ayer, kind of like with the Snyder cut, was saying that he's going to get his version of the movie released, or his director's cut of the movie, and people will like that a lot better. But after campaigning and fighting for quite a while now, it's looking like that's actually not the case, and he's pretty much done even trying. We got this article from IGN kind of going into a little bit more details with it. So Suicide Squad 2016 director David Ayer is officially giving up his campaign to have his director's cut, dubbed the Ayer cut by fans, released by DC. Ayer said in a series of posts on X/Twitter, some of which are now deleted, that he's done with DC, while also telling fans he was no longer going to fight for his version of the film to be released. CRIES for the Ayer cut began after the extended Snyder cut version of Justice League was released in 2021, which saw a 4-hour version of the original widely panned film released. I do believe him when he says his version would probably be better, because yes, the Snyder cut was better than the original version, but the original version wasn't very great, and I don't think the Snyder cut was that much better, but still, it was a better version. But unlike Zack Snyder, I think I like David Ayer's movies a little bit more than his. I thought Fury was really good. Street Kings, underrated movie. End of Watch, that was fantastic film. So David Ayer's version of Suicide Squad would probably be a lot better. And yes, the studio did kind of do him dirty with that one, with the way they were editing it without his permission and stuff like that. But, you know, he's just the director of it. It's not his movie. The studio's the one paying the bills, so they get final say so in this. But despite all this, he's been kind of hopeful. At least he's come across as being hopeful that there's going to be an Ayer cut of the movie released at some point, especially after Zack Snyder got his version of the movie released. And even just last month, he was basically given an interview saying that he thought that they were actually going to do an Ayer cut of the movie. This is, December 5th, 23. So, yeah, just about a month ago, that he was saying that he thinks they're going to actually have his version of the movie come out. And turns out that's actually not the case, because he was saying, director said in an interview that he's hopeful that his version of the DC film will eventually materialize, despite some powers preventing it from happening. And I would guess the powers preventing that from happening would probably be the executives over at Warner Brothers, because anyone who's been following Warner Brothers and DC this last year have known that they've been having a series of bombs at the box office. There was Shazam 2, then The Flash, then Blue Beetle, and now Aquaman is currently floundering at the theater. So Warner Brothers is probably looking at this and thinking, do we really want to invest any amount of money into Suicide Squad, a movie that came out, 7 years ago now? Wow, that time flies. But yeah, it's a movie that came out 7 years ago, and they're probably thinking, like, do we really want to invest any amount of money into releasing another version of this? Would that really help them, especially when they've been losing money hand over fist when it comes to the old DCEU? Not to mention the fact that the Suicide Squad Ayer's version of it is still a part of the old guard when it comes to DC, and James Gunn is going to be rebooting this whole thing anyway. So Warner Brothers executives are probably thinking, what's the point of spending any amount of money to bring back this movie that's probably not going to do that great anyway, because people aren't going to be invested in it when it's going to be rebooted anyway. So kind of like with Aquaman, I mean, that's failing, and pretty much anything that DC's been releasing since James Gunn took over has failed, because people aren't going to be invested in a movie that's going to be a part of a shared universe that's going to be retconned out of existence. So maybe they're thinking Suicide Squad is just another casualty in that endeavor right now. And if they were to invest any more money into it, they'd just be throwing money away at that point. Earlier this year, Ayer shared on social media that he had talked to DC Studios co-head James Gunn, who assured him that his cut of the film would have its time to be shared. And I don't really know what actually happened with that talks. Was James Gunn being sincere about it, or was he just kind of saying like, yeah, we'll check it out later on, just we're busy right now with other things, you know, sort of things, like if you're asking someone for something and they sincerely say, yes, we're going to do that, versus like, yeah, sure, whatever, we're going to do that sort of thing. And I don't know if that's necessarily what happened, or maybe James Gunn sincerely thought like, okay, if things go a certain way, then we can discuss whether we can actually release the Ayer cut, so to speak. And maybe David Ayer took it a little bit more seriously, so that's why he was kind of championing it and talking about it, because he thinks that it was going to happen. But apparently it's not going to happen right now, and he's basically just given up. And I can understand him being frustrated with the whole idea of this because, I mean, he obviously worked really hard on this movie. In fact, it kind of coincides with tweets he was making last month about complaining about people who are basically just ragging on movies all the time, or what he says, like wanting movies to fail. I did a video about it too. I'll leave a link to that video in the description of this video. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's so much as people were just wanting movies to fail or wanting his movie particularly to fail. It's just people are calling out movies that they think are bad. And even though the problem with the Suicide Squad wasn't necessarily his fault in particular, I mean, there was a lot of issues with that movie. Some of them I can lay on his feet. Some of it has to do with the studio. Some of it is the writing for it. But I mean, there's just a lot of people who are involved with making a movie. And usually for a really good movie, all of them have to be on the top of their game. And if one person fails, then it can pretty much just tear down the whole thing. And I do think there is blame to go around on this one, but the studio, I believe they're just doing what they think is best for them because, I mean, they've lost so much money on their DCEU this last year. I don't think they can afford even the potential for another bomb like this.